Well, it's been a month. Today we're going to talk about all the books I read in January. Hard to believe that the first month of the year is already gone by. So this month I read 10 books and it is a mishmash and all over the place because this month I was like, I'm reading whatever I feel like. So it was kind of like whatever I was in the mood to read, whatever I stumbled upon, that was what I read. I read a couple biographies, I read some horror, I read some nonfiction, some fantasy, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. All right, so the first thing I read this year was Sonny Boy by Al Pacino, which was Al Pacino's biography, and it's a fantastic biography. If you were a fan of Al Pacino, honestly, it's a must read. It's like sitting down with him and he tells you stories from his life and how he got from point A to point B, and all the things in between. Growing up in poverty and finding a love for acting at a very young age, going to see movies with his mother, so seeing his life in theater. It talks about his friends growing up, and unfortunately, the friends that he was closest with when he was younger, they all passed away due to drugs, and just how, like, if he hadn't got out of that, he probably also would have went down that pathway. But acting kind of saved his life, as well as some of the people that were in his life. And just, it's a fantastic read. After that, I read my first Haruki Murakami book called The City and Its Uncertain Walls, and what a fantastic, weird, and liminal read. So it follows the story of this boy and this girl. They're teenagers and they're in love. And one day, the girl starts talking about how this self of hers is a shadow self, and her real self lives in this town with really high walls. If the boy ever goes there, she won't remember who he is, but there'll be a place for him there where he can go and be the dream reader and read dreams. And they'll be able to spend time together every day. She just won't remember who he is or have any of the memories of their time together before when they were in love. And it might take him many years to find a way to get there. And so eventually he does find his way to this town because she disappears mysteriously, and it's such a strange and beautifully written book. I really loved it and I really want to read more from this author. Fantastic. After that one, I read a super hype book called The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I didn't dislike this book and I didn't love it. Like, I didn't think it was amazing. I hate reading books that are overhyped, but then I also like to read them at the same time because I want to see, is the hype for real? And a lot of times, like, stuff just gets hyped up to a level where you're going to be disappointed because it's not going to live up to the expectations that people have, like, been like, do 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 do, like, talking about. So I thought the story was solid. I do think it was like a little too long. Like, they could have trimmed a lot of parts out of it, I feel, because some of it was a slog to read through. But the core story was good. It was a mystery. It's supposed to be a mystery thriller. I didn't really think it was that much of a thriller. It was more of like, I don't know, a disappearance mystery. So it follows the story of this girl, Barbara. She is the daughter of this super rich family, and years prior, her brother had gone missing, and they presume at this point that he's dead and not alive anymore. So years later, she goes missing. So then it's like, okay, is it someone in the family that did this? Is it someone they know? And there's all this like stuff and people that it could be, a lot of suspicious people and whatnot. And I thought the core story was pretty good. I thought it was a decent book. I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. I actually have a standalone review of that. If you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts on that, that's more in depth, I'll have a link down below in the darkness to that one. After that, I read another biography, and that was Uncanny, The Origins of Fear, and that is a biography about Junji Ito. And Junji Ito, if you don't know, is one of the most well-known horror manga artists. His art is weird as heck, and it's also wondrous. It's so strange. And it goes into his life just from like being a kid up until current times, like how he got into manga and his first experiences of terror and horror, his process for when he draws manga, and like all throughout his life from a kid up until, now, he would draw pages and pages of manga. Like, that's what he did from kid to preteen to teen to adult and beyond, just never stopped. It's a pretty cool story. I like getting his viewpoint on stuff, and you get like some of the backstory on some of the manga he's written and about like how a lot of the locations and stuff is places like he grew up running around and experiencing with his friends, and he puts that in the manga, and I thought that was pretty cool. So if you're a fan of Junji Ito, I would highly recommend this book. It's pretty great. Okay, so after that one, I am a big fan of the show Parks and Recreation. So I picked up the book Welcome to Pawnee by Jim O'Hare. It's a nonfiction and it's all about parks and recreation. You know, Ron Swanson, Leslie Knope. So it's Jerry, Gary, Larry, Barry's perspective of his experience of Parks and Rec. So you get some of these behind the scenes stories, how the show came to be, how he got the job on the show, how at first he wasn't going to be a regular, but then eventually both him and Donna or Retta, they were not initially going to be regulars on the show, so they weren't sure, you know, how long they'd be on there and whatnot, but they did end up becoming regulars. How the crew, they were all so close. Just little stories and anecdotes and funny things. And it's funny because he seems pretty goofy. And when he tells some of his stories, like some of his stories about meeting these famous actresses and stuff, because he's a bit older, and he talked about meeting like Mary Tyler Moore and how like he lost the ability to speak, like he was speechless, and she kind of thought he was not all there, maybe slow, and so he has some of these stories about meeting these famous actresses, and I'm like, oh, he's such a fanboy. So I thought that was kind of fun, and just yeah, seeing like his acting trajectory and how he got to where he was. It was a fun read if you're a fan of Parks and Rec. After that, we needed a little bit of horror, so I read the book Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. This is a thriller. It follows these three siblings, and they all return home when the mother dies. The one daughter had stayed with the mom and been with her the whole time and was with her when she passed. And once she passes, the siblings come together and they're going through like the mom stuff and whatnot. And their dad had disappeared like 7 years prior and they never found out what happened to him. But they are going through these old VHS tapes and they watch this one where all of a sudden like their dad busts out the woods and he's like covered in blood. And he's saying stuff like, it was an accident, da da da, turn off that video camera, come with me. And so the mom goes with him. And all of a sudden there's this dead body of this 12-year-old girl who was like the next door neighbor that had gone missing years and years ago. They never knew what happened to her. And so then the camera cuts off and the siblings are like, what in the F is this? Hello? They have to decide like, should they dig into this more or should they just leave it alone? And since it's a horror book, what do you think they do? Oh man, they dig in, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that book. After that one, I read a pretty awesome fantasy called The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. And the description of it is it's kind of Narnia-esque. And while it's not quite Narnia, it is about stumbling into a fantasy world. So that part of it is Narnia-esque. And there are strange magical creatures. There's unicorns and cyclops owls and red crows because crows are not red. And so there are magical creatures and there's some elements that are kind of like Narnia. And I loved it. I thought it was a really great story. So it's about these two guys. They went missing when they were in high school in this forest called the Red Crow Forest. And they were gone for like 6 months. And then all of a sudden they reappeared, kind of like stumbling out of the forest. And they were found by this couple there. The one lady was a nurse and the one boy was kind of injured. And so she helped them. They came back and they were like taller, stronger, and it didn't look how someone lost in the forest for 6 months should look. All right, so fast forward, they grow up. The one guy, he is a missing persons locator, and the other guy, he kind of lives in the forest, and he's an artist and takes care of the land that he lives on, keeps poachers out of the area and whatnot. There's this woman named Emily, and she approaches the guy, Jeremy, who is the guy who locates lost people, and she wants him to help find her sister. And her sister had gone missing 5 years prior to when they went missing in the same forest. He doesn't want to help her at first, but then he decides to, and he needs his friend Rafe, who was the other boy that had went missing, to come with him to help find the sister because he can't do it without him. And you'll find out why he can't do it without him. So they haven't seen each other in like years and years. So they're going to come back together and find what they had lost and help this other girl find what she had lost too, which was a missing sister. It's a story about found family. It's magical. It's beautiful. Also a love story. And I loved it. It was great. Highly recommend it. Okay, after that one, I read like the most magical thing I've read recently. It is called The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. There are winged cats. There are mer horses. There are mer people. There are sentient cactuses named Meep. I love Meep. There's also a plant person named Kaz. All right, so follows the main character, and she is a librarian in this city of Elysium. Elysium's like this big fancy city, but it is at war, and the war is coming closer and closer to the library. So her and her assistant Kaz, they have been kind of like taking some of the spell books and putting them on the library boats just in case the crap hits the fan. And well, one day it does, and they have to escape. So they get on the boat with the books and get out on the water and narrowly escape. The city's on fire, the library's on fire, and they're like, where the heck are they gonna go? The main character, she decides we're gonna go to Caltray, where she grew up. That's where she used to live, and she thinks she might still have a house there. So they're gonna go there because what the heck else are they supposed to do? So they go and they travel all day and night, and they get there. And the dock, it's kind of rickety and it's missing boards, but it's still there. So they're able to tie up the boat and get up there. And they go and they find the cottage, still has a wall and roofs. A lot of stuff is overgrown and it is in disrepair and in bad shape, but it's good enough. So they get in there. Then the next day, her door's open and some guy with like a scythe is standing in the door, and she's like, "What the f?" He kind of like had that because he was had to whack a path to like get to her cottage because everything was super overgrown. And she's like, "Yeah, this used to be my parents' cottage, and this, that, and the other." And so she meets him, and then he brings over like some food and stuff, and she's kind of standoffish because she's been used to not dealing with anyone, and she like lived in the library. She didn't really talk to anyone else, like just her and Kaz. That was her friends, and she doesn't really feel like she wants more people in her life. But as she starts to get settled into the island and she starts a jam shop, and also which kind of fronts for her remedies, like she's not supposed to use spells because magic is illegal to use unless you're like a fancy sorcerer. And so she starts using magic to help this island because the island has kind of fallen into disrepair and it's not what it used to be. The cats are a little scrawnier, the kids are a little scrawnier, like the springs and water doesn't flow like it should, the fruit trees are dying, and sorcerers used to be sent by the kingdom, by the emperor, to like fix all the stuff in the past, but they stopped coming in the last several years. So like the island's kind of like sinking into poverty and whatnot. So she wants to help. It's such a magical, cute, and cozy story. It is maybe my new favorite cozy fantasy. Like, it's up there with Legends and Lattes, guys. It's super cute, and it's a cozy romance too, and it's adorable, and I loved it. I talked about that one for quite a bit, didn't I? Well, I liked it quite a bit, so would highly recommend it if you want a cozy and rosy and nosy fantasy book. All right, after that, I read a book called Water Moon by Samantha Soto Yambao. And this book was magical and whimsical. You travel by puddle, you travel by rumor, and when you're in a rumor, you're like traveling in the mind of someone as you're passed from person to person. And there was all these like crazy magical elements. This village that created the stars every night that they would fly as kites and then they would turn into stars in the sky, and like there was a lot of magical stuff in it. And while the story was good, it felt like 2D to me. It never quite fully blossomed into 3D. It felt very surface. Like the characters, the emotions only scratched like the surface level, and I never felt fully invested in them. Like the story was decent, but I didn't care what happened to the characters. And like I really want to care what happens to the characters in the books. That's important to me. It was magical and it was a fun story, but I never got emotionally invested. After that one, I read Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chaplin. Holy bananas. This horror book is horrifying. It follows the story of this character, Noah. His parents kind of got sucked into like the whole Fox News. It's called Fax News in this. All the things to be horrible about. But the mom kept calling Noah and talking about this like great awakening. The great awakening is going to happen. This, that, and the other. And like would call him like more and more and more. And then one day he goes to call her back and then she doesn't answer. And then he keeps calling her and she doesn't answer again. Then he gets worried that something happened to his parents. Like, was there a gas leak in the house? Did someone break in? Did something happen? And so he's like, oh, well, maybe I should travel down there, see if they're okay. He's in New York, they're in West Virginia. So he hops in the car, drives 6 hours. And when he gets there, the house is in shambles. There's food rotting everywhere. The light bulbs have all been like busted. And every TV is on in the house on Fax News, just blaring, blah, blah, blah. When he walks in, no one answers. He's like, hello, mom, dad, anyone here? And nope. Eventually, he does find them, and they're like these weird zombie people staring at the TV. At the moment of this like great awakening or whatever, when they kind of like snap or come to or something, they don't really come to. they seem to go into super zombie mode. Like the mom attacks Noah and then he has to get the F out of Dodge. But it's not just his family, it's like going on all over the country and it's super scary. It resonates. It's a horror for today because it's when nonfiction and fiction meet. That is this horror book and it's fantastic. 5-star horror. I flew through it. It was hard to get into initially because, you know, if you have family members who have turned into monsters that didn't used to be that way, or maybe they always were and you just didn't know it. This book, it portrays it very well. All right, so out of all of those, my favorites were this one, Wake Up and Open Your Eyes, definitely for horror, and The Spell Shop by Sarah Bester. Horror, and then the super nosy, rosy, cozy fantasy because it was super cute. So what were your favorite reads this month? Yeah, I was kind of, like I said, I just wanted to read whatever I felt like this month, so I was kind of all over the rainbow of different genres and whatnot. If you enjoy videos where I talk about multiple things I'm reading or have read, next video coming up will be about that, so stick around, check it out. And if you enjoyed hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.